I'm Elena Gallagher, 35, and today was supposed to be the celebration of my 10-year wedding anniversary with James. I spent weeks planning the perfect evening, from my designer dress to the reservation at Elysium, the most exclusive restaurant in town. Despite James acting distant lately, I convinced myself tonight would reconnect us. As our car pulled up to the gleaming entrance, the knot in my stomach tightened. If only I'd known what awaited inside those doors. Before I tell you how my perfect anniversary turned into the most humiliating night of my life, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned this betrayal into the sweetest victory. On paper, my life looked absolutely perfect. After graduating with honours and climbing the corporate ladder, I had established myself as a marketing executive at Crawford & Mitchell, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. My career was thriving, my wardrobe was filled with designer labels, and I lived in a beautiful colonial-style home in the most affluent neighbourhood of Westlake. 12 years ago, I met James at an industry conference in Chicago. He was charismatic, ambitious, and impossibly charming. With his perfectly tailored suits and confident smile, James commanded attention in any room. We connected over drinks at the hotel bar, and what started as professional networking quickly evolved into something more. By the end of the conference, we had exchanged numbers and made plans to meet again. Our romance moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were spending every weekend together. James would surprise me with spontaneous getaways to Napa Valley or the Hamptons. He sent flowers to my office weekly and wrote me thoughtful notes that made my colleagues swoon with envy. 2 years after we met, James proposed during a private dinner cruise around Manhattan. The ring was breathtaking, a 3-carat emerald-cut diamond that sparkled almost as brightly as our future seemed to. We built our life together methodically with the same precision James applied to his investment banking career. Our wedding was featured in a regional luxury magazine. Our home was showcased in an architectural digest. Our social circle consisted of partners from James's firm, executives from my company, and various influential people we'd collected through charity galas and country club memberships. From the outside, we were the golden couple. Our anniversaries were always special. James made it a tradition to celebrate in increasingly lavish ways each year. For our 5th, he gifted me his grandmother's sapphire necklace, a family heirloom that brought tears to my eyes. 6th anniversary, a surprise trip to Bali. 7th, a custom-designed bracelet from Tiffany. 8th, a weekend at a castle in Scotland. 9th, a private cooking class with a Michelin-starred chef in our home. For our 10th, I expected something extraordinary, but in the weeks leading up to our anniversary, I noticed subtle changes in James. He started working later than usual. His phone became a fortress, always placed face down or quickly pocketed when I entered the room. He was less affectionate, creating distance between us, even when we shared the same bed. When we did talk, conversations remained superficial, never venturing beyond work discussions or household logistics. One evening, while reviewing our credit card statements, I noticed several large charges at restaurants I'd never been to, a significant purchase at Cartier, and hotel bookings downtown just 20 minutes from our home. When I casually mentioned these to James, he dismissed them as business expenses that had accidentally gone on our personal card. I believed him, or perhaps I wanted to believe him. After all, we were approaching a decade of marriage. I attributed his strange behaviour to work stress, or perhaps planning an anniversary surprise. The week of our anniversary, I threw myself into preparations. I purchased a new dress, a burgundy off-shoulder Valentino that cost more than my first car. I scheduled appointments at my favourite salon for hair and makeup, enjoyed a full spa day with my closest friend Sophia, and even ordered custom stationery to write James a heartfelt letter expressing my love and gratitude for our years together. 2 days before our anniversary, James suggested we try a new restaurant instead of returning to Maison Laurent, where we traditionally celebrated. "I've made reservations at Elysium," he said, without looking up from his laptop. "I hear their chef just earned a 3rd Michelin star." I was thrilled by the change. Elysium was notoriously difficult to book, with a waiting list extending months. The fact that James had secured a table confirmed my suspicion that he was planning something special. "That sounds perfect," I replied mentally, adjusting my expectations for an even more magnificent evening. The day of our anniversary arrived with perfect early autumn weather. Sunlight streamed through our bedroom windows as I laid out my dress and accessories. I spent the afternoon getting ready, taking my time with each detail. As I applied my lipstick, the finishing touch, I studied my reflection. Despite being in my mid-30s, I looked youthful and radiant. The woman in the mirror smiled back at me with hope and excitement for the evening ahead. James arrived home precisely at 6:30, just as I was fastening my grandmother's diamond earrings. He looked handsome in his new charcoal suit, but seemed distracted. When I approached to straighten his tie and kiss him hello, he accepted my affection with stiff politeness rather than returning it with his usual enthusiasm. "You look nice," he said, glancing at his watch. "We should get going. Traffic might be heavy downtown." The drive to the restaurant was mostly silent. I attempted small talk about his day, the beautiful weather, and my excitement about trying Elysium, but James responded with short, non-committal answers. He seemed preoccupied, checking his phone at every red light, despite my presence beside him. Still, I remained optimistic, convinced that his distraction was related to whatever anniversary surprise awaited me. The valet opened my door as we arrived at Elysium. The restaurant occupied the top floor of a gleaming skyscraper offering panoramic views of the city skyline. The entrance featured a cascading water wall with the restaurant's name illuminated in subtle gold lighting. It was even more impressive than I had imagined. As we walked through the ornate doors, I noticed James checking his phone again, typing rapidly before slipping it back into his pocket. The maitre d' greeted us with practiced elegance. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Gallagher. We've been expecting you. Please follow me." Instead of leading us into the main dining room with its renowned city views, the maitre d' guided us toward a separate area. James placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that would normally feel intimate, but now seemed mechanical, as if he was simply steering me in the right direction. "I thought we'd be seated in the main room," I whispered to James. "I requested something more private," he replied without meeting my eyes. The maitre d' opened double doors to reveal a private dining space, and my heart stopped. Instead of an intimate table for 2, a long table was arranged for at least 12 people, and it was already occupied. James's business partner Theodore was there with his wife. Several colleagues from James's firm sat with their spouses. Our neighbours Richard and Cynthia were chatting animatedly with James's college friend Brian, and at the head of the table, in what should have been my seat beside my husband, sat a woman I recognised vaguely but couldn't immediately place. She was younger than me, perhaps 28, with sleek blonde hair and a black designer dress that hugged her figure. When she saw us enter, she stood and smiled brightly. That's when I noticed it hanging around her neck was my sapphire necklace, the family heirloom James had given me on our 5th anniversary. The room fell quiet as we entered. James cleared his throat and addressed the group. "Sorry, we're a bit late. Traffic was worse than I expected." The woman approached us, her hand extended toward me. "Elena, it's so good to see you again. I'm Amanda Davis from Client Relations. We met at the Christmas party last year." Recognition dawned. Amanda was the new hire at James's firm. The one he'd mentioned was revolutionizing how they handled client accounts. What I couldn't understand was why she was wearing my necklace at my anniversary dinner. James guided me to a seat, 3 places away from his, with Theodore and Amanda between us. As waiters poured champagne, Theodore stood and raised his glass. "To James and his brilliant new venture, May tonight mark the beginning of an exciting new chapter. Everyone lifted their glasses, but no one mentioned our anniversary. Confusion turned my stomach to lead as I sipped my champagne. Across the table, Cynthia caught my eye, then quickly looked away. Something was very wrong. Throughout the appetizer course, I tried repeatedly to catch James's attention, but he was engrossed in conversation with Amanda, their heads tilted toward each other with familiar intimacy. When I attempted to join their discussion, James introduced a new topic, with Theodore effectively shutting me out. I scanned the table and realized that no one would meet my gaze. These were people who had been in our home, who had celebrated holidays with us, who had been part of our lives for years. Yet suddenly, they were strangers exchanging knowing glances when they thought I wasn't looking. "Would you excuse me?" I said to no one in particular, rising from my chair. No one seemed to notice as I made my way to the restroom. Once inside, I braced myself against the marble sink and took several deep breaths. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Why was everyone acting so strangely? Why was Amanda wearing my necklace? Why had no one mentioned our anniversary? As I reapplied my lipstick with trembling hands, the restroom door opened. 2 women entered, wives of James's colleagues, whom I'd met at various company functions. They froze when they saw me, guilt flashing across their faces. "Oh, Elena," one began, but the other pulled her arm. "We should give her some privacy," she whispered, not quietly enough. "I just feel so bad," the first continued as they retreated. "Poor Elena. I can't believe James is doing it like this in front of everyone." "She was bound to find out eventually," the second replied, as the door closed behind them. "At least this way, the plan will be executed cleanly. No messy scenes." Their words echoed in my head as I stared at my reflection. What plan? What was James doing? With shaking hands, I texted Sophia. "Something strange is happening at dinner. Call me in 5 minutes with an emergency." Then I straightened my dress, lifted my chin, and returned to the table, determined to understand what was unfolding. The main course arrived with theatrical flourish. Servers appeared simultaneously around the table, placing silver domes before each guest. With coordinated precision, they lifted the covers to reveal perfectly arranged plates of Wagyu beef, truffle-infused potatoes, and seasonal vegetables. Under normal circumstances, I would have been impressed by the presentation and excited to taste such exquisite food, but nothing about this evening was normal. As everyone began to eat, James stood suddenly tapping his knife against his crystal water glass. The soft chime silenced the table, and all eyes turned to him. My husband smiled broadly, exuding the confidence and charm that had first attracted me to him 12 years ago. "Friends, thank you all for joining us tonight for this special occasion," he began. My heart lifted momentarily. Finally, an acknowledgement of our anniversary. Perhaps this strange evening was about to make sense. "As you know, the past year has brought remarkable growth to our firm," James continued. "Much of that success can be attributed to the fresh perspective and innovative strategies brought by our newest team member." He turned toward Amanda, who blushed demurely under his gaze. My food turned to ash in my mouth. Amanda has not only transformed our client relations department, but has also helped me see new possibilities in every aspect of my life, James said, his hand now resting on her shoulder. "Her vision for the future aligns perfectly with mine, both professionally and personally." The table erupted in supportive murmurs and knowing smiles. I sat frozen, my fork suspended halfway to my mouth, as realization dawned with sickening clarity. James retrieved an envelope from his jacket pocket and walked around the table until he stood beside me. With ceremonial formality, he placed the envelope beside my plate. "Eleanor," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, The past decade has taught me much about business success and personal growth. I've come to understand that life is too short for compromise or half measures. It's time for a comprehensive restructuring of my personal and professional life to ensure maximum efficiency and happiness going forward. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," prominently displayed at the top, divorce papers. At our anniversary dinner, a shocked silence fell over the table, followed by uncomfortable laughter from several guests. I looked up to find James watching me with detached interest, as if my reaction were merely data to be analysed rather than the emotional devastation of a woman he had once loved. "I believe in being authentic," James continued, addressing the table rather than me. "And authenticity requires honesty even when it's difficult. Elena and I have grown in different directions. It's time to acknowledge that reality and move forward with integrity." He returned to his seat beside Amanda, who reached for his hand with practiced tenderness. The sapphire necklace gleamed at her throat, catching the light with each movement. My grandmother's ring felt suddenly heavy on my finger. "To new beginnings," James declared, raising his wine glass. His friends joined the toast with varying degrees of enthusiasm, while their spouses at least had the decency to appear uncomfortable. Inside, I was shattered. A decade of memories flashed before my eyes. Our first apartment with second-hand furniture, weekend trips to the coast, quiet Sunday mornings, reading the newspaper together, holidays with our merged families, planning our future children's names. All of it apparently meant nothing to the man sitting across from me now, publicly discarding our marriage like an outdated business model. Yet, outwardly, I maintained composure. Years in corporate boardrooms had taught me to never show weakness. I would not give James or his friends the satisfaction of witnessing my breakdown. Looking around the table, I realized everyone had known about this ambush. Our friends, our colleagues, people who had eaten at our table and accepted our hospitality, had conspired in my humiliation. Some avoided my gaze entirely, suddenly fascinated by their food. Others watched with morbid curiosity, waiting to see if I would create a scene. All the strange behaviour of recent months suddenly made sense. The late nights, the guarded phone, the unexplained expenses. James hadn't been planning an anniversary surprise. He'd been planning this public execution of our marriage. "The papers require your signature on pages 3, 7, and 12, James said, sliding a pen toward me. "I've had my attorneys draw up a fair settlement based on the prenuptial agreement." Amanda leaned forward, her manicured hand possessively draped over James's wrist. "We're hoping to move forward quickly," she said with artificial sweetness. "James mentioned you've always been reasonable and pragmatic." A suffocating silence fell as everyone watched, waiting for my response. James had orchestrated this entire evening to minimize potential resistance, counting on social pressure and my fear of public embarrassment to ensure my compliance. With trembling hands that I forced to steady, I picked up the pen. James looked relieved, clearly having expected tears or arguments. Instead, I silently turned to each marked page, signing my name with deliberate strokes. When I finished, I closed the document and handed it back to him without a word. "Thank you for being so understanding," James said, tucking the papers back into his jacket. "I knew you'd see this is best for everyone." As dessert was served, conversation gradually resumed around me. I sat silently, fork untouched, as chocolate soufflé melted uneaten before me. Amanda now openly snuggled against James, her hand resting on his thigh beneath the table. She wore not just my necklace, I now noticed, but also the tennis bracelet James had given me for Christmas last year. "We should discuss the house," James said casually between bites of dessert. "Amanda loves the location, but we're thinking of some renovations to update the style." "It needs a woman's touch," Amanda added. "No offense, Elena, but that formal dining room is so last decade." From across the table, Theodore's wife, Patricia, looked genuinely pained. "Perhaps this conversation can wait for a more appropriate time," she suggested gently. "Why wait?" James's friend Brian interjected already on his third whiskey. "It's all being handled civilly. That's the advantage of marrying someone practical rather than emotional, right, James?" His crude joke was met with uncomfortable silence. "Could I have another glass of wine, please?" I asked the hovering server, my voice surprisingly steady. As the server poured, I made a decision. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, calculating anger. James had orchestrated my public humiliation, confident that I would quietly accept whatever terms he dictated. He believed I was financially dependent, emotionally fragile, and completely uninformed about his business dealings. He had never been more wrong. Excusing myself to the restroom, I closed the stall door and pulled out my phone. With steadier hands than I expected, I dialed a number I'd saved months ago, but hoped never to use. "Marcus, it's Elena Gallagher," I said quietly when he answered. "Yes, I'm certain. Everything we discussed. First thing tomorrow morning. Yes, I have all the documentation." I ended the call and took several deep breaths. In my purse was a USB drive containing copies of financial records I'd discovered 6 months ago while organising James's home office. Offshore accounts, questionable transactions, evidence of insider trading related to the Westbrook merger. I had kept this information as insurance, never truly believing I would need it. James had underestimated me, assuming that my focus on our marriage meant I was oblivious to his professional indiscretions. When I returned to the table, I approached with renewed confidence. James noticed the change immediately, his smile faltering slightly as I took my seat. "Feeling better?" he asked, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "Much better," I replied, smiling pleasantly. "In fact, I just remembered I haven't given you my anniversary gift." Confusion crossed James's face. "That's really not necessary, Elena." "Oh, but I insist," I said, reaching into my purse. 10 years is a significant milestone after all. The table fell silent again as I withdrew a small, wrapped box and handed it to James. He accepted it reluctantly, turning it over in his hands as if checking for explosives. "Go ahead," I encouraged. "Everyone's waiting." With cautious fingers, James unwrapped the package to reveal a small velvet box. Inside was a custom keychain, a miniature silver key attached to a platinum disc engraved with our wedding date. "It's a replica," I explained to the confused table, "of the key to safety deposit box 7142 at First National Bank." James's face drained of colour as I continued conversationally. "Inside that box are copies of all your financial records from the past 3 years. Offshore account statements from the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, text messages and emails regarding the Westbrook merger, transcripts of conversations with insider sources, detailed documentation of funds moving through shell companies." Amanda's hand withdrew from James's arm as she turned to him with growing alarm. "James, what is she talking about?" Theodore and 2 other partners from the firm had gone deadly still, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "Oh, and I just got off the phone with Marcus Daniels from the SEC's Enforcement Division," I added lightly. "He's a college friend, you know. His team will be at your office first thing tomorrow morning. Apparently, they've been building a case for some time, and my evidence was the missing piece." The chaos that erupted was immediate and magnificent. James lunged for my purse, but I calmly moved it to my lap. Theodore and the other partners were simultaneously shouting questions at James while frantically texting on their phones. Amanda had gone pale, her eyes darting between James and the exit. "You can't do this!" James hissed, his carefully cultivated public persona cracking. "You'll go down too. Your name is on some of those accounts." "As an authorized signer only," I corrected him. "Marcus has already reviewed everything. I've been granted immunity in exchange for my cooperation. Being the betrayed spouse has its advantages in these situations." The restaurant manager approached our table, concerned about the commotion. "Is everything all right here? We've had complaints about the noise level." "Everything's fine," I said calmly. "My husband just received some unexpected business news, and we're celebrating our divorce, apparently." The manager's professional smile faltered as he looked around at the chaotic table, clearly uncertain how to proceed. Amanda was now frantically questioning James. "Is this true? Are you under investigation?" When he failed to answer, focusing instead on urgent, whispered conversations with Theodore, she unclasped the sapphire necklace and placed it on the table. "Keep it," I told her. "Stolen goods suit you, though I should warn you, the SEC tends to confiscate assets purchased during periods of financial fraud." Standing up, I addressed the entire table. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been illuminating to learn who our true friends are." I focused particularly on the couples who had been in our home countless times. "I hope your loyalty to James was worth the cost to your own reputations once the investigation becomes public." As I turned to leave, James grabbed my wrist. "Don't do this, Elena. We can work something out." I removed his hand from my arm and looked directly into his eyes. "You should have thought of that before serving me divorce papers at our anniversary dinner. Enjoy dessert. I hear the prison commissary doesn't serve chocolate souffle." With that, I walked out of the private dining room through the main restaurant and into the warm night air, leaving chaos erupting behind me. The valet rushed to get me a taxi, and as I settled into the back seat, I finally allowed the first tears to fall. Not tears of sadness, but of release. The life I had thought was perfect had been an elaborate illusion, but in its destruction I had found my power. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and silent tears. The taxi driver, sensing my distress, kindly pretended not to notice as I struggled to maintain composure in his rearview mirror. When we arrived at the house James and I had shared for 8 years, I overtipped the driver and walked slowly up the path to our front door. The house felt different as I entered, as though it had already ceased to be my home. Family photos that once brought comfort now seemed like artifacts from a stranger's life. I moved through the rooms with new awareness, seeing everything through the lens of betrayal. The couch where we'd spent countless Sunday afternoons watching movies. The kitchen island where we'd shared morning coffee. The dining room where we'd hosted the very people who had sat watching my humiliation tonight. I went directly to our bedroom closet and pulled out a suitcase. With methodical precision, I packed essential clothing, personal documents, and irreplaceable mementos, my grandmother's jewellery box, photo albums from before I met James. The first marketing award I'd received. I left designer clothes and expensive shoes James had bought me, taking only items I had purchased myself or that held sentimental value. As I zipped the suitcase closed, my phone erupted with notifications. James had called 7 times and left 3 voicemails. There were multiple text messages from him, cycling between threats and pleas. "You have no idea what you've done. We need to talk immediately. You're making a terrible mistake. Please, Elena, let's discuss this rationally. You'll regret this if you don't call me back." I silenced my phone without responding and continued packing a second bag with toiletries and personal items. While in the bathroom, I noticed a text from Amanda. "I had no idea about the SEC investigation or that today was your anniversary. James told me you two were already separated and had filed months ago. I'm so sorry." The audacity of her apology after wearing my jewellery and planning to move into my house ignited fresh anger. I blocked her number without replying. More messages arrived from people who had been at the dinner. Patricia Theodore's wife sent a long apology, claiming she had only learned the truth upon arrival at the restaurant. Richard and Cynthia, our neighbours, expressed shock at James's behaviour and insisted they would never have attended had they known the real purpose. Even Brian, in his drunken state, sent a rambling text about bros before hoes that devolved into incoherence. I ignored them all. Anyone who had sat at that table was complicit in my humiliation. Their belated remorse meant nothing. After loading my bags into my car, I took one final walk through the house, gathering financial documents I might need and securing personal items I couldn't bear to lose. In James's home office, I found additional evidence of his affair with Amanda, a framed photo of them hidden in his desk drawer, weekend getaway receipts, even a list of pros and cons about leaving me. The coldly calculated nature of his betrayal removed any lingering doubts about my course of action. Rather than returning to an empty house where every room held memories, now tainted by betrayal, I checked into a luxury hotel downtown. The concerned receptionist, noting my tear-stained face and single suitcase at such a late hour, discreetly upgraded me to a suite and arranged for a complimentary bottle of wine to be sent up. Alone in the pristine hotel room, I finally allowed myself to fully experience the emotions I had suppressed during dinner. Anger, grief, humiliation, and fear crashed over me in waves. I alternated between sobbing into plush hotel pillows and staring numbly at the city lights spread below my window. How had I been so blind? How could the man who had once written me love poems and promised forever have orchestrated such a cruel ending to our marriage? Around 3 a.m, emotionally exhausted, I finally fell into restless sleep. I was awakened at 7 by a news alert on my phone. Major financial investigation launched at Gallagher Investments. CEO James Gallagher named as primary target. The speed with which Marcus had acted surprised even me. By 9 o'clock, my phone was inundated with calls from unknown numbers, likely reporters seeking comment from the CEO's wife. I ignored them all and instead made an appointment with Diana Montgomery, reputed to be the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Diana's office projected power and success with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district, where coincidentally James's firm was located. As I explained the events of the previous evening and presented the signed divorce papers, Diana's professional demeanour gave way to genuine surprise. "You actually signed these?" she asked, flipping through the document with growing disbelief. "He didn't give me much choice," I replied. "It was either sign or create a scene in front of everyone." Diana removed her glasses and fixed me with a penetrating stare. "Mrs. Gallagher, these papers are essentially worthless until filed with the court, which hasn't happened. Furthermore, this proposed settlement is ludicrously one-sided. It's a good thing you didn't actually file these documents." She proceeded to explain that James's fair settlement would have left me with roughly 20% of our marital assets, no alimony, and no claim to his business interests, despite the years I had supported his career, often at the expense of my own advancement. Given the circumstances, Diana continued tapping the newspaper headline about the SEC investigation, and especially considering the public humiliation aspect, we're in an extremely advantageous position to counter. Financial fraud during marriage creates exceptional leverage in divorce proceedings. We spent the next 2 hours with Diana's team, including a forensic accountant who specialized in hidden assets. They were particularly interested in the contents of my USB drive, which revealed far more extensive financial misconduct than even I had realized. James had been shifting assets offshore for years, preparing for either market collapse or more likely his exit from our marriage. "This level of premeditation is actually helpful to our case," Diana explained. "It demonstrates malice aforethought in his financial planning, which strengthens claims for punitive distribution of assets." As we concluded our meeting, my phone lit up with James's name for the 20th time that day. Diana nodded, suggesting I answer on speakerphone so she could hear. "Elena, finally!" James sounded frantic. "We need to talk immediately. The SEC is at the office, Theodore is threatening to resign, and the board is calling an emergency meeting. Whatever you told the SEC, you need to retract it now." "I can't do that, James," I replied calmly. "The evidence speaks for itself. This is about last night, isn't it?" Look, I handled it poorly, I admit that, but destroying my career is not an appropriate response to relationship problems. I'm not destroying anything, James. Your own actions did that. I maintained the composure I'd found since leaving the restaurant. I'm with my attorney now. All further communication should go through her office. Your attorney? His voice rose in pitch. Eleanor, don't be dramatic. We can work this out between us just like we planned. Like you planned, you mean, with your carefully orchestrated public humiliation and one-sided divorce terms. My voice remained steady. That option is no longer on the table. You're making a serious mistake, James warned, his tone shifting from pleading to threatening. If you push this, I'll make sure you regret it. Diana leaned forward. Mr. Gallagher, this is Diana Montgomery representing Mrs. Gallagher. That sounded remarkably like a threat which I've documented. I strongly advise you to retain counsel immediately and direct all future communication through appropriate legal channels. There was a long pause before James responded, his voice now coldly controlled. I see you've decided to go nuclear, Elena. Remember, I know all your secrets too. The call ended abruptly, leaving Diana looking thoughtfully at my phone. Interesting, she said. He's pivoting to intimidation quickly, which suggests genuine panic. Is there anything I should know about these secrets he mentioned? I shook my head. There's nothing. It's a standard James tactic when he's cornered. Vague threats to make you back down. Diana nodded, making notes. Good to know his patterns. It will help us anticipate his next moves. As I left her office, a text arrived from Amanda. James just told me to pack. Says we need to get away for a while. What's really going on with this SEC thing? I deleted it without responding, feeling strangely detached. The woman who had smiled smugly while wearing my jewellery last night was now experiencing her own rude awakening to James's true character. I spent that evening in my hotel suite, ordering room service and watching news reports about the financial irregularities at James's firm. Not once did I cry. Instead, I felt a growing sense of resolution, as if I had awakened from a long, pleasant dream to find reality sharper and clearer, if less comfortable. The next morning, I met with my bank to secure my personal accounts and financial records. By afternoon, my news alerts informed me that James had been temporarily suspended pending the investigation, and the FBI had joined the SEC in examining the firm's trading activities. By evening, Amanda had disappeared from the picture entirely, with mutual acquaintances reporting she had cleaned out her desk and left no forwarding address. Former dinner guests began reaching out with increasing desperation. Theodore's wife, Patricia, called 3 times before leaving a voicemail insisting she had no idea about James's financial improprieties or his affair. Cynthia, from next door, left flowers at the hotel with a card claiming she and Richard were completely blindsided by James's behaviour at dinner. James's college friend, Brian, sent a drunken text apologising for his toast, claiming James had misrepresented the entire evening as a surprise party with an unconventional theme. I maintained my silence, focusing instead on rebuilding my life from the ground up. In truth, beneath my anger and hurt, I recognised something unexpected relief. For months, perhaps years, I had been sensing changes in our marriage, but convincing myself everything was fine. Now that the illusion was shattered, I could finally see how much energy I had been expending to maintain it. 3 days after the disastrous anniversary dinner, I received a call from a number I didn't recognise. It was Sophia, my friend who had been unreachable since the night of the dinner. "Eleanor, thank God," she said when I answered. "I've been trying to reach you for days. My phone died the night you texted about dinner, and then I got your messages too late. Are you okay? I've seen the news about James." Hearing her genuine concern broke through some of the protective shell I had constructed. For the first time since leaving the restaurant, I allowed myself to fully confide in someone, explaining everything that had happened. "I should have been there," Sophia said when I finished. "I can't believe he did that to you in front of everyone." It's probably better you weren't, I replied honestly. You might have caused the scene I was too shocked to create. Damn right I would have, she confirmed. Have you been back to the house? Do you need a place to stay? Her offer reminded me that not everyone in my life had been part of James's inner circle. Some relationships existed independently of my marriage and would survive its demise. This realization provided unexpected comfort as I continued navigating the strange new reality of my life. The following week brought the initial hearing regarding the SEC investigation. Diana accompanied me to court, where I saw James for the first time since the restaurant. He looked haggard, his normally impeccable appearance now disheveled. The designer suit hung loosely on his frame and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He attempted to approach me before proceedings began, but Diana smoothly intercepted him, directing him toward his own attorney. The judge's interim ruling froze all of James's assets pending full investigation, including our joint accounts and properties. Diana immediately filed emergency motions to release funds for my living expenses and to grant me exclusive use of our home during proceedings. Given the circumstances and the publicity now surrounding the case, the judge ruled in my favor on both counts. That evening, I returned to the house for the first time since the night of the dinner. James had been ordered to remove personal items only under supervision. Walking through the front door felt surreal, like entering a museum dedicated to a life I no longer recognized as my own. I wandered from room to room, mentally cataloguing what I would change, what I would remove, what I would reclaim. In our bedroom, I discovered Amanda had indeed spent time there. Her perfume lingered on James's pillows, and long blonde hairs contrasted starkly with my dark ones on his brush. Rather than distress me, these discoveries strengthened my resolve. I stripped the bed completely, bundling sheets and pillowcases for donation. From the closet, I removed all of James's remaining clothes, boxing them for his attorney to collect. In the bathroom, I discarded his toiletries and replaced every towel and washcloth with new ones. Room by room, I reclaimed my space, removing traces of betrayal and creating something new from the wreckage of my marriage. When reporters called seeking comments on what they were now calling the anniversary ambush and the SEC bombshell, I maintained my dignity by refusing to engage. Unlike James, who had attempted damage control through a poorly received press statement claiming financial misunderstandings and personal misrepresentations, I chose silence. As media interest in the story grew, I received multiple offers for exclusive interviews. Diana advised declining all of them, noting that public restraint would serve me better, both legally and personally. James is creating his own narrative collapse by talking too much, she observed after his disastrous appearance on a financial news program. Let him continue digging while you maintain the higher ground. Her advice proved sound. With each public statement, James further damaged his credibility. His attempts to portray himself as the victim of misunderstandings grew increasingly desperate as evidence mounted against him. Meanwhile, my reputation as the wronged wife who maintained dignity despite public humiliation generated surprising support, even from people who had witnessed my humiliation at the dinner. Throughout these weeks of legal proceedings and public scrutiny, I gradually reconnected with myself, the Elena who existed before becoming Mrs. James Gallagher. I rediscovered my passion for photography, a hobby I had abandoned when James complained about the time it took away from social obligations. I reconnected with college friends I had gradually lost touch with during my marriage. I even contacted my former mentor at Crawford and Mitchell to discuss returning to the career path I had adjusted to accommodate James's ambitions. Gradually, the shock and pain began to subside, replaced by a growing sense of possibility. The end of my marriage, while traumatic, had freed me from a life that had become increasingly constrained by James's expectations and deceptions. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to rediscover my strength and independence. 6 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, I sat at a corner table in Bistro Laurent, the restaurant where James and I had celebrated many previous anniversaries. This time, I was dining not with James, but with Sophia, who had become my steadfast supporter throughout the divorce proceedings. "I can't believe how much has changed in half a year," Sophia remarked, raising her wine glass. "To new beginnings that we choose ourselves." We clinked glasses, and I took a moment to reflect on the journey from devastation to empowerment. The final divorce settlement had been finalized the previous week, granting me 70% of our marital assets, full ownership of our house, and substantial alimony based on James's pre-investigation income levels. Diana had been masterful, leveraging both the financial fraud evidence and the public humiliation aspect to secure terms far exceeding standard distributions. James himself was facing multiple criminal charges for securities fraud, insider trading, and financial misrepresentation. While awaiting trial, he had been living in a modest apartment and working as a consultant for a former college classmate. A stunning fall from his previous status as CEO. His frequent appeals to reduce the divorce settlement had been repeatedly denied by the court, particularly after evidence emerged that he had been concealing additional assets. Amanda had resurfaced briefly during the proceedings, attempting to claim she had been manipulated by James and was another victim of his deceptions. Her testimony proved more harmful than helpful to James when she inadvertently revealed additional instances of financial misconduct. She had since relocated to another state, reportedly working at a significantly less prestigious firm. The sapphire necklace, along with other family jewelry James had given to Amanda, had been returned to me by court order. After much consideration, I had decided to sell the necklace and donate the proceeds to a foundation supporting survivors of domestic abuse and financial exploitation. The symbolism of transforming an heirloom that represented betrayal into resources, helping others find independence, felt powerfully appropriate. My own career had taken an unexpected and exciting turn. During the divorce proceedings, I had reconnected with a former colleague who was launching a financial literacy platform specifically designed for women. Recognizing the value of my experience, she had invited me to join as a partner. The venture combined my marketing expertise with the financial knowledge I had gained through my divorce battle, creating educational resources to help women achieve and maintain financial independence regardless of relationship status. "Have you heard from any of the dinner party guests lately?" Sophia asked, interrupting my reflections. I shook my head. "Not directly. I heard Theodore and Patricia separated last month. Apparently, the stress of the investigation and Theodore's potential liability was too much for their marriage." "Karma works in mysterious ways," Sophia observed. "And Richard and Cynthia, they were trying so hard to get back in your good graces." "They moved," I replied. "Richard's law firm asked him to transfer to their Chicago office. I suspect the association with James became problematic for his career." We continued our dinner discussing everything from my new business venture to Sophia's recent promotion. The conversation felt natural and authentic, in a way my social interactions rarely had during my marriage, when appearances and connections had often taken precedence over genuine connection. As dessert arrived, Sophia asked the question I had been expecting. "Have you thought about dating again?" I considered my answer carefully. "I've had offers," I admitted, "but I'm not ready yet. I'm still learning who Elena is on her own terms. When I do start dating again, it will be with much clearer boundaries and expectations." "And better vetting," Sophia added with a smile. The healing journey had not been linear. There were still days when anger flared unexpectedly, moments when the humiliation of that night resurfaced with painful clarity. Therapy had helped me understand that healing doesn't mean forgetting or even necessarily forgiving, but rather integrating the experience into a larger life narrative that continued to unfold. One of the most valuable lessons had been learning to distinguish between authentic connections and superficial social relationships. The dinner party had revealed how many of our so-called friends were attached primarily to status and access rather than genuine caring. In rebuilding my social circle, I had become more discerning, valuing depth and loyalty over impressive credentials or social standing. Financial independence had taken on new meaning as well. Despite always having my own career, I had allowed James to handle our major financial decisions, trusting his expertise in investment banking. Never again would I cede that control to anyone else, regardless of their professional background or relationship to me. The educational platform I was building with my new business partner aimed to help other women avoid similar vulnerabilities. Perhaps most importantly, I had learned to trust my instincts. Looking back, there had been countless warning signs I had ignored or rationalized away. The unexplained charges, the guarded phone, the emotional distance, all had been trying to tell me something my heart wasn't ready to hear. Now I listened more carefully to that internal voice that recognized inconsistencies and raised alarms. As our dinner concluded, Sophia raised her coffee cup in a final toast. To your revenge, which turned out to be building an even better life than before. I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. The revenge fantasy I had briefly entertained in those first raw days after the betrayal, seeing James publicly humiliated and financially ruined, had evolved into something far more powerful and lasting. True revenge wasn't about destroying James. It was about rebuilding myself stronger than before. Walking out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, difficult as it had been. The divorce papers James had so cruelly presented at our anniversary dinner had ultimately become the key to my liberation rather than my destruction. The public humiliation he had orchestrated had revealed the true nature of our social circle and freed me from the exhausting performance of perfection. 1 week earlier, I had received a letter from James. Unlike his previous communications, which had alternated between blame and manipulation, this one contained what appeared to be a genuine apology. He acknowledged the cruelty of his actions at the anniversary dinner and expressed regret for the years of deception. Whether this represented actual growth or simply a strategic move before his upcoming trial remained unclear. Either way, I had read the letter once, then filed it away without responding. His journey was no longer entwined with mine. Life after betrayal had taught me that resilience isn't about never breaking, it's about what you build from the pieces. The woman who had signed those divorce papers in shocked silence 6 months ago could never have imagined the strength and purpose she would discover in the aftermath. For those watching who might be facing their own moments of betrayal or seemingly insurmountable challenges, I want you to know that the darkest moments can truly become turning points toward an unexpected light. Sometimes what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more authentic and fulfilling than what came before. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led to positive change in your life? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of transformation and resilience. Your support means everything as we build this community of strength together. Remember, sometimes the most painful chapters lead to the most beautiful sequels. Thank you for sharing this journey with me, and I wish you the courage to write your own triumphant next chapter.